I am Captain Logan, and this is day 247 of Spawn Year. This issue is almost all flashback, meant to fill in the gaps in Al and Wanda's relationship and expound on important details that have been only barely touched on. The goal here seems to be to build on that idea from last issue, that war is hell and can separate a man from his humanity. And it seems to make me hate Al, Terry, and Wanda a lot more. Apparently, I wasn't reaching when I suggested that might be referring to Al as much as it referred to Forsberg, and this issue is painting Al precisely as I predicted Hogwin was going with this. Before he died, Al was indeed losing touch with reality. He loved his job more than he loved his wife. Hogwin makes it clear that Al enjoyed hurting people and that he had become consumed by his lifestyle, taking advantage of his physical strength, his military training, and his position in Wynn's organization to lead exactly the life he wanted, regardless of who he might hurt, even those he cares about. We're given 3 key moments in Al's past, each from the perspective of Al, Wanda, or Terry. It's a surprising framing device because each shows me one of these characters thinking back to a moment, but contrary to the storytelling I'm used to with this book, what we're given seems to be the cold, brutal, honest truth, and not some cryptic or watered-down version from an unreliable narrator. Maybe the reason Al has never remembered his past so plainly and included every horrible detail is that before he was recently reunited with his symbiote and forced to take a hard look at how awful he's been to everyone in both of his lives, he was never honest with himself about the detached, hateful, manipulative person he was. That doesn't really explain why we're just now getting these flashbacks from Wanda and Terry, though, and the issue would be less awkward if the whole thing was Spawn just finally getting real, spilling his guts, maybe to Nyx, just one long 22-page confession where he finally sees himself for who he really is. But I must give Hogwin some credit for not telling these little episodes through another character's written interpretation, littering the page with unnecessary narration boxes. The first memory is Al's, sparked by visiting an old restaurant from his past, a place that was apparently named after the creator of Hellboy, Mignola's. Al and Wanda had their engagement party there, and in the restroom, Terry, trying to be a concerned friend, gives Al the advice that he should quit fieldwork. The life of a mercenary is no life for a man raising a family. Al gets irrational and accuses Terry of trying to take his stature and reputation from him, that Terry's only saying this because he hates living in Al's shadow, and Al says he's making the world a better place. He says that, I think, as a justification, like he's trying to convince himself in denial. I'm reading it that way based on number 125, where Al realizes he was never a hero and resolves to try to finally become one. I like Terry's comeback. There are lots of ways to make the world a better place. Raising a family is one of them. Al's main problem seems to have always been not being able to tell the difference between making the world a better place and making the world a better place for himself. And when Terry calls it like it is, saying Al won't do the right thing because he likes hurting people, Al, who we knew already had a bad temper, punches the paper towel dispenser next to Terry and responds with, "I don't like hurting people, but I don't mind either." Everyone's scared of Al, so they keep letting him bully them around. These flashbacks reveal that Al had terribly unstable relationships with both Wanda and Terry. In Wanda's flashback, which she has while looking through an old photo album, Al is about to go on another mission and Wanda's angry he's leaving because she just had a miscarriage. Wait, a miscarriage? Although we've always been told the problem was on Al's end, now Wanda blames him because of that time he hit her. Obviously, Al did a terrible thing there, and that was the first sign that the perfect soulmate relationship he touts up in the early comics was total denial, and all he really cared about was forcing the people in his life to create a picture-perfect existence for him. But still, Wanda's incredibly passive-aggressive. As far as we know, Al was only abusive the one time, and the only injury we know she sustained was on her arm. That's probably not going to affect the pregnancy. Now, maybe it was worse, I don't know, But I'm suspicious because she displays even more passive-aggressive tendencies in Terry's flashback, when she spends an inordinate amount of Al's money on shoes just to get back at him for hurting her. She also brings Terry along. I don't know who's worse, Wanda for making Al's best friend tag along while she lashes out against him in a shopping spree, or Terry for making a move on her right afterwards. Wanda, the correct response to abuse is to leave. So they have a huge argument, and naturally, because it wouldn't be Spawn without this sort of melodrama, the last words Wanda says to Al are, "Go to hell." And in Terry's flashback, he and Wanda nearly have an affair in their desperate loathing for Al, but then they think better of it. Wow, this really isn't so far removed from that alternate history dream sequence where Wanda's glad Al died so she and Terry could be together and they just make out at his funeral. The big reveal at the end in present day is that Terry has quit his job and is selling the house Al and Wanda lived in together. Wanda and Terry moving is the reason all these terrible memories are flooding back to them. That was Al's house, and they're finally moving away from that last big reminder of him. If he was so awful to both of them as we see here, it's hard to understand why they stayed in that house to begin with. After all that legwork, getting Spawn past pining away for Wanda and forging ahead to give Spawn a real new direction that finally moved away from Al Simmons' past, we're right back to adding to, retconning, and revisiting Origin. I thought the whole point of definitively separating Al and Spawn was to get to a point where we could quit defining the character and start developing him. Nope. Issue 127 in the book is, good grief, still groping around, trying to decide who its protagonist really is. And all of this is hammering way more nails in the coffin than it needs to. I already thought Spawn was in denial about his relationship with Wanda. Putting her on such a high pedestal like he always did already made it pretty clear that he was more in love with his idealized fantasy of the perfect life they never had than he was with her, especially since he pathetically and scumbaggingly tried to steal her better life from her when he temporarily got his face back, even knowing it was only temporary. Maybe the story isn't only about Spawn realizing he's a loathsome, destructive person. Maybe this is just Holguin throwing his hands in the air and saying, okay, I tried, I really did, but I can't reconcile Spawn as a sympathetic character. All I can do is contrive a way for him to have an epiphany and understand why he hasn't been worth reading for 125 issues and move on. Or, more likely, it's not that meta, and McFarlane mandated all this retconning and reworking, and the joke's on me for thinking anyone but me is working this hard to make Spawn likable or interesting or anything other than a delusional sociopath. I just don't get it. Is this the tragic story of a man who made a deal with the devil because all he wanted was to see his wife one more time? Or the story of a deranged madman who's so evil, hell makes him a grim reaper, but he's so far gone he dilutes himself into thinking he's a superhero? Or maybe Bulgy gave him false memories on purpose? Amnesia, unreliable narrators, cryptic delusions that may or may not really actually be reality. Does anyone really know what's actually going on in this story? Does anyone really care? Signed, Captain Logan.